Hello, everybody. I'm here with John Engels and Nicholas Engels. John Engels launched Leadership Coaching Inc. in 1996 with a bold mission to help leaders strengthen families, fortify family enterprises, and shape healthy leadership teams across every sector of society. He's been at this for 3 decades, and the Leadership Coaching Inc. is a trusted and global enterprise, and people from all over the world come to talk to John. He studied Bowen theory at the Bowen Center for the Family Study, and this informs his work. John's been around the world. He's worked with people in all shapes and forms, and currently he's working on ERG, a racial awareness initiative in his hometown of Rochester, New York. And John's just a fascinating guy to talk to, and I'm glad you're here, John.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And Nicholas Engels um, helps leaders find clarity in the moments that matter most, when the future of a family business or a relationship hangs in the balance, and whether guiding heirs preparing to take the helm, executives leading billion-dollar enterprises, or senior teams navigating tough decisions. Nick's deep insight and skillful questions usher clients from entrenched patterns to meaningful connections, from intelligence to wisdom. And I'm going to ask you about that later, Nick. What the hell is wisdom, and how do we get from intelligence to wisdom? Nick is the lead facilitator of Leadership Coaching Inc.'s annual Advanced Leadership course, which is rigorous, highly selective 10-month program in relational mastery, maturity, and strategic influence. And it's been going on for 26 years now. Nick is incredibly insightful and sharp, and I can only imagine that his work with leaders is profound, and I'm happy to have you here, Nick.
Thanks,
So welcome.
Guillermo. Good to be here.
And Nick has an 8-month-old son, and so he's a new dad. So congratulations on that, Nick.
Thank you. Yeah.
Absolutely. So to get started, just tell me a little bit about yourselves, about your personal history, end of the story, overview, brushstrokes of where you're at. Let's start with John.
Well, when I was teaching interviewing back about 30 years ago, it was well known in the field that the hardest question to answer, the hardest question is tell me about yourself. Because where do you start? What do you say? And there's no handles, you have to go on nothing and start somewhere. I would say that I'm a lifelong learner, that I've been through a lot of experiences, both academically and in the trenches, that continue to teach me about myself and about how humans function and about how animals function. And all of that has been important in my journey. Probably the centerpiece of it is the experience of marriage, family, raising 3 children, learning about them, learning from them. It's a tremendous course, a very long course in self-awareness and humility, at least the way I'm experiencing it, the way I have experienced it. So, the work has been focused in the last maybe 35 years in systems thinking, anchored by Bowen family systems theory, but going even beyond that, all systems. And systems thinking is kind of a way of seeing problems and a way of seeing functioning that's really kind of a non-blaming way of looking at something, where responsibility becomes more important than blame. And that idea has really anchored our work in coaching leaders and working with leadership teams, and even the writing and the public speaking we do. So that's sort of, I'll stop there. There's, if you want to get more targeted, I can go with that, whatever.
That's a good place to start. And Nick, what about you? You grew up in Rochester, right? Rochester, New York?
Yeah.
Still there?
I'm still here. Yeah. I officially settled here really like 7 or 8 years ago.
And you've had an interesting journey. You kind of and where you ended up.
Sure. Yeah. So I think the way to probably characterize it for me is that I've, having an upbringing with John as my father. I think there was a big part of my life that was, you know, surrounded by these ideas of, self-awareness, responsibility, maturity, skin in the game. I think John being who he is and being starting a business, um, bringing these ideas to clients, there was a lot of introduction of this in the house with both my parents, and so I think I really got early exposure in a way that in any other profession, a next gen who's exposed to a family business or family mindset or a skill set. I just think there was in this field, a real advantage that I had in that way. And so in my own journey from that point, I just sort of kept building in and strengthening those muscles and tools. And, like a big part of my learning was when I was 19. Went and did a national outdoor leadership school program in Australia and spent 3 months in the remote wilderness there. And it was a real immersion and intensive leadership process and group dynamics, and in an outdoor setting. And we were a group of 10 and traveling in a very remote part of the country, and had to kind of a survivalist setting. And so, in addition to the physical demands, there was the emotional people component and the group dynamics and the types of conversations we had to have and debriefing that we had to do and repair work that we had to do out there. And so learning the people dimension of high consequence leadership was early in my career, big influence. Mm. And then that's a big one. I think, my background is in mental health. I've really got my chops as a facilitator, and learning group dynamics in clinical substance abuse settings, inpatient, and running groups there. And also inside prisons, I also ran groups with inmates. And, these are settings that I think now have really helped prepare me for what I would call, in some ways lower stakes, with client systems and business systems. And so I think, so that's another one. And research, was part of a U of R program that did a lot longitudinal research on kids and families and looking at childhood maltreatment and the impact on later life development. So, the family piece and the kind of a human piece of demographics of people who are struggling and really suffering, and bringing that into just a completely different demographic in business post-graduate school has been really, interesting for me. And I have, so pulling from multiple sources to develop a coaching practice and consulting practice has been really important. And I think, it's informed Bowen theory has been an important piece of that. And in some ways, a foundation of the business that we're starting here now, the succession that we're doing. And yet it's also limited in its own right. And there's other aspects of life that are important to bring in and have been important for me to bring in and integrate into the coaching work, because there's just there's a lot out there. I just think, what is that baseline? What are people looking for from us? I think there's lots of ways to answer that, but I think people many people want to be better. They want to improve. They want a sense of purpose and meaning in life. And so I think basically that's what I'm trying to do, is help people find it and find themselves really, and get clear on who they are so that they can lead themselves and their teams in a way that feels in alignment with their own integrity and what matters to them.
Mm. Where do people that come to you, where do you find what are they up against? Like what's the lack of clarity that they're bringing in that they're coming to you looking for?
Good question. There's many. I think what what people often come to us looking for and what they discover are often not the same. So some people they come to us because they have team members who are struggling and they don't know how to deal with them. They don't know how to work with them. And then when they get with us, they find out pretty quickly that they themselves are a big part of that. And a big part of the commitment to doing the work with us is not to fix the team and to fix the people that they're talking about, but just to help them, is to look at themselves and to help them find a broader range of response options to whatever issues pop up and whatever dynamics are occurring on the team. Is what are their limitations and how have they been responding? It turns out there's a lot of substance there for those leaders. So I think there's often a expectation coming in that is quickly debunked, and I think revised as they find out what we're really about. And learning. We don't know. We're here to. We are off. Just our big thing is getting to a system is trying to learn first what's really happening here, and we use theory to inform that. But there's some, and there's people are suffering. We find out, for example, people come to us with system challenges and personnel challenges. You look at every person in the system. Look at the leaders who are hiring us. They themselves have lives. They have personal lives. They have families. They have kids, wives. And there are dimensions of suffering and all of that they are up against. And so we were just, my dad and I were just talking to a guy. We had dinner with a guy a couple of nights ago who's it's just wildly successful and has a name that many people in our city would know. Is very, very huge reputation, and he doesn't have any friends. He doesn't have anybody to talk to. And it's really interesting. It's like, this is another thing. People come to us because they don't have realness in their lives. They don't have substance in connection with people. So, looking at the very basic components of what we're doing, offering people a chance to connect at a deeper, more substantial level with themselves first, and then with their constituents. Having a platform to gain more awareness and insight and attunement to what they're up against. Finding a way to transmit that in an appropriate way to their teams and building a culture that's more transparent, more connected, more aligned with mission and vision and values. We're doing them. There's a lot of components to it. Maybe my dad can fill in more, but yeah.
Would kind of a general brushstroke be that one thing you help people come to you with a problem they see as an external issue, and you're saying, hey, let's start with you. That how are you part of this system that's going on, and kind of helping them to take a step back from it, see themselves as part of it, this type of thing?
Yeah. I would say if they don't see that, then it probably disqualifies them as a client for us. Yeah. They have to see it. They have to be able to see that, because it's not are you, it's what is your part. Not do you have one. There's no question that they have one in our minds, at least coming in. So, and it's almost never been the case where that's not happening in some way. So, yeah.
John, did you have anything coming to mind for you? A story or any thought?
Well, I think Nick said it well. I think he put out, it was a good summary of how we do it. I always think of our work as addressing avoidance. Like that. Really, it's a big issue in our work. Is there are important things to be talking about, and we're not talking about them. There are conversations I need to be having with my boss that I'm not having. There are conversations I need to have with my direct reports that I'm not having. There are conversations I need to have with my wife, my kids that I'm not having. In a family business, the younger generation, there are conversations the younger generation should be having with their parents or the founders or the owners, and they're not having them. So avoidance is a big part of what we do, is helping people counter the avoidance and learn how to do it. Like, it's one thing to know I have to talk to my mother about this. But it's another thing to know, well, what are you going to say? And how are you going to say it? And where are you going to say it? What's the setting? And are you going to blurt, or are you going to craft a message? How do you prepare for this, for saying what you need to say? And how do you decide what you don't have to say? Sometimes you don't have to say anything. So this, I think another piece it brings up is discernment, sifting, filtering, trying to tame the tendency toward black and white thinking, toward single causes of things, toward easy answers to complex questions, trying to deepen people's insight and awareness so that they're not operating in shallow water all the time. That's sort of how I see a lot of our work.
It's so interesting, John. Both and Nick, I appreciate how you laid everything out. I've been thinking a lot about this idea that what's a maturing move for one person, for another person might be a regressive move, or vice versa. I think it goes to what you were talking about of discernment. It's not that there's a specific step. It's how do you discern which step is right for you, and that's going to look different for depending on your situation, your context, what's going on for you internally. Where do you guys start? How do you help somebody start to build that awareness?
For me, a lot of it is questions. People's conception of consultants has been skewed by that brand of consultants that are experts. We have a problem. We have a strategic planning problem. We have a structural problem. We have a technology problem. What do we need to do to fix it? And in the relationship world, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way, fixing problems. The way it works is looking at the complex variables that are going on, looking at how things impact, how the way I treat my son, for example, impacts my spouse, or all of that. It's helping people think. And I just think one of the best ways to help people think is to ask really good, penetrating questions. So I think that's a lot of what we do, what we would offer people as a way of helping them, get clearer in their own head about how they might think about a problem or what they might do about something, what action they might want to take.
So it's insight and planning, kind of, you're helping with both.
I think our job is not to give insight. It's more to stimulate self-responsibility and self-clarity. I think in the end, we're stimulating something. We're helping something. We're accessories to a process. We're not changing people's lives. We're helping them look at how they want to change their own lives and helping them try to make some progress there.
I like that. I like that a lot. That idea of being an accessory to somebody's process. Nick, what would you say if what would you say about? And I think your dad was talking to this. John was talking to this. Different about this systems approach versus the traditional consulting. That yeah.
I think when traditional consulting or therapy or counseling, just like having the broader view on whatever the person in front of us is going to be doing, or how they're going to be thinking, or what they're going to be feeling. All of this sort of dimensions of a human are having downstream effects in some way. And it's not cause and effect. the other dimensions or components of any system are having effects on that one person. And I think we're not in the business of getting people to see that as much as asking the right questions or bringing the right stories ourselves, or sharing a pointed, I don't know, like learning that we've had. As if we bring in a lot of stories with our clients, and I think it's, what does it get them? What is, like John said, what does it get them stimulated? What stimulates inside them? And I think, there's the systems idea has been very, just very helpful to, I think, limit blame and finger pointing. And so it's like when people are coming to us with wanting to blame or finger point, the framework of systems helps us to pin that right away and have it. So there's tells and signals that someone is in a sort of a cause and effect mindset. And we're trained to notice those signals and to bring it back to something that's broader. And not just broader, but also personal. Because how they're what they might be signaling at work is also likely happening on the home front. And it's interesting because what I've noticed myself is a lot of the value in what we bring in the form of questions and this mindset, the framework of systems idea. People get a lot of traction at home, sometimes more than at work. They're getting so much, the staying power of the ideas is when people are applying it to their spouses and kids and parents, extended family. They see it. They see how their own functioning is, having a undermining effect on their kids' autonomy and independence, for example. And then that's when it really hits home. It's not their direct report as much. The same ideas apply, but it's when they see them then selling their kids out that really is hits home. Yeah.
And John, you were going to say something too.
No, it was hitting home because I just had an interaction yesterday with a father who was 68 and his daughter is 39. And he called me, he was referred to me by a colleague. And the referral was that his daughter is freezing. His daughter is a graduate of 2 Ivy League schools, very, very impressive pedigree, very intelligent. And he reports to me that his daughter is freezing in job interviews. She's going for high-level job interviews, and she's not getting the jobs because she's highly anxious in the interviews. So his ask of me was, can you please help my daughter interview better? The person who referred you said you know something about this. Can you please help her? And I knew right away, because of a systems thinking habit, a systems thinking preference that I have, that I think any systems thinker would have, is that my client is the man. My client is not the daughter. I knew this right away before he even contacted me. Because of the nature of the referral and what I was told, I knew that my client was going to be the man. So when he called up and we had a Zoom call and he said, my daughter is suffering. And, I asked him, why wasn't she calling me? The hour ended with him talking about his anxiety about his daughter and making a commitment to work on that with me. And he said, well, what am I going to tell my daughter? And he was very, he was in the habit of saying to his daughter, he was using we language with his daughter. What are we going to do here? Let's get you some help. Even though the kid is 39, it's a child-focused, anxious parent trying to deliver unhelpful help to the kid. So that's an example to me of a systems approach. Is you're looking at the messenger as much as you're looking at the problem the messenger is talking about. Mm. And that's just to me, every coach is in that triangle: the messenger, the problem, and the coach. And if we know that as coaches, we look at problems differently. We don't join the messenger in making the problem, if you're following what I'm saying. So anyway, that's sort of a common rhythm, I think, in client work.
Yeah, you're not joining the messenger with talking about the problem in a specific way. You're trying to see the bigger picture of this, like with this guy and his daughter. That it's not that his daughter's problem is the problem. It's that his um, anxiety about her dilemma is his challenge.
Yeah, or the thesis would be: would her interviewing improved if he calmed down?
Oh,
that's a way of thinking about it as a system.
And I would just add that I don't view that as a way of diagnosing the problem itself either. That his response to his daughter is the problem. That is a problem in my view, because his daughter also has a part to play. So I think, yeah, there's an interplay, and it can get, with all these theories, it can get, I've fallen into that trap myself in my own work, is even with systems thinking, is even when identifying what they think the problem is, what this guy might think the problem is, or even in my own parenting, my child isn't sleeping. And if I blame myself for that, I have a part in that for sure. I mean, it's maybe slightly different because he's 8 months old, but I think the blame piece is not helpful in any way. It's not helpful. It doesn't serve any purpose. The father blaming himself for his own anxiety is not good. Not a good thing.
It keeps the anxiety going. That's for sure. Do you think it's would one way to say be thinking about processes and patterns is one way to think about this, rather than blame, cause and effect? Like what are the processes going on, and what's everybody's part in it?
I would say, the father I'm talking to, is he interested in taking his part of the responsibility without blame, without blaming himself or the daughter? Forget blame, throw it out the window. Replace the word with responsibility. Does that fit? Yeah, I just think that's maybe a more respectful way to look at it. Is he has his part of it, she has hers, and his wife and her mother probably have a part to it, and her sister or brother probably has a, it's. I mean, the reality of the work is we can get all theoretical about it. We can get into theory, but I have somebody in front of me who sees the problem in a way that I don't see it, who is looking at it as a blaming, fixing thing. And, I just don't see it that way. So how am I going to communicate that to the client? How am I going to invite the client into a different way of thinking? That skill is something I have to develop. And sometimes I blow it. Sometimes I don't do well with it. Sometimes I'm too heavy-handed with what I see. Sometimes I avoid because I'm uncomfortable with, let's say the client who's calling me, the dad, is owner of a business. It could give me a lot of work. Does that affect the way I talk to him? Am I more ginger? Am I more careful? Am I more pandering? So I'm part of the system now.
Do each of you have a story where, well, you could tell me whatever you want, but where it went well, where you feel like you're able to bring perspective, or ask the useful questions that you were just talking about, to not get caught up in the system?
I've got one. I just had a leader I was meeting with yesterday, and this person was bringing me a challenge that she was having with one of her direct reports, who was repeatedly breaking protocol when requesting time off. So it's a routine little small little challenge. And she has spent the first 15 minutes of the meeting, I would say, complaining about this person and lamenting the fact that she's had these conversations with her about about the fact that, when she puts in a request, she hasn't it's her responsibility to find someone to cover for her, and that there are boundaries around who can cover for her, whatnot. And my central point or my central question to her was, what has she exposed about her own limitations to this direct report? And the conversation about the direct report repeatedly breaking protocol and my client's lack of clarity in setting expectations, that conversation was not being had. So I was asking the client about, just turning it inward and looking at herself, and what is the part, where has she, her own expectations in boundary setting been limited? And it was I think effective because it was an effective example of, it's a simple idea of turning inward and looking at your own part. And so I think where it left her was silent and thinking about her own way in which she's giving up on the direct report before she has a chance to really reflect on. I think vulnerability is an important thing to do. It's an important thing to bring people in on how your own functioning has contributed to the disruption you see in the other. Yeah.
Do you see that as something that is a reliable go-to? Do you see it as something more strategic, like strategic vulnerability? Does that idea, does that make sense to you, Nick?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think there's there's a lot out there on vulnerability, and the way I hear a lot of it being expressed is it's always good in every situation. And I find myself questioning that. I don't think that's what you were saying, but I just want to make that clarification.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, what is vulnerability? I think it's sharing just to share is not really, I think one can share impact without making it the other person's problem. How do I share the impact something is having on me without putting it on the other person as being their fault or their problem?
Yep.
Yeah. And I think that's it's a basic theme, and it can be effective, but again, it does require discernment and judiciousness about when to do it, when not to, when to be sharing something about yourself, when to be asking a pointed question, when to be listening. Sometimes it might be useful to step in and dictate. This is the nuance in the work that we do. When someone's going to make a major mistake, but you value learning from mistakes, but the mistake they're going to make is going to cost the company a lot of money, you may have to step in, and you may have to suspend the learning for that instance and say, no, we're not going to do it this way. And so it's not a formula. This is not formulaic coaching. It's really requires a lot of, I think, experience and hunches backed by some ideas.
I really love this idea that it's not formulaic, of things not being formulaic, that it's about kind of evoking, to use words you guys were, discernment and responsibility, how people are taking hold of those things in their life and in whatever context they're facing. It's really helpful to view coaching that way, the work that you guys do. Speaking of that, how are you guys managing this collaboration that you're doing from one generation to another? Father, son, you got a business. What's guiding you?
I'll just go back, and there's a segue here that one of the things that's not formulaic is the overall importance of connection. By the way, this is it's been a struggle of mine as a student of Bowen theory, a longtime student of Bowen theory. It's been a journey for me to understand, as theory is often presented, it's missing the idea, the importance of connection. The fear of togetherness has created, I think, an emotional environment in the network of Bowen theory that has missed the deep importance of being able to connect and separate both. So this is a big focus of our work as well, is how do you connect with people? How do you connect? And connect in a healthy way, not in a fused way, not in a way that you lose yourself, but it's an important theme. So to segue it to your question.
Before we go there, Dad, I want to ask you something about that, because I think there's something here, which is, what is your take on what that need is about? Why is connection important to basically everybody, is the way I hear you saying it?
Who are you? Who are you to coach me? Who are you to say you're my father? Who are you to say you're my son? If we have no connection, what gives us the credibility? What gives us the engine to do the work we have to do together is the experience we have of connectivity. And yes, it's true that often, particularly in families, this connectivity, the only form of it people might have is intense emotional attachment. But there are other forms of it that are really important. And I think that's the purpose of it, is to, you have an 8.5-month-old. I'm thinking that you're spending a lot of time connecting with that child right now. Later, when you have to exert discipline on that child and give direction to that child that the child's not going to like, I think that connection is going to be really important in how that goes. And that's a metaphor to me for working with clients. You have to be able to connect. I've worked with a lot of consultants over the year, Bowen consultants over the years. And when it doesn't go well, it's not because they don't know theory. It's not because they're not intelligent, it's because they're not connecting. I just think that's really, really important and often overlooked, and definitely overlooked as a focus point in promulgating systems theory.
I'm with you, John. I'm along with this idea of things not being black and white. I've been thinking about how do people sit in the tensions of being connected and separate, an individual and part of something. So I found that as well. When things don't go well, it's usually because I didn't connect well with somebody. And the connection can create a lot of forgiveness in the relationship, a lot of looseness in the relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing that's has been important for my work, is to understand connection. And are there components of it that we can actually teach to people? I believe that belonging is a fundamental human experience. Generally speaking, wanting to belong to a group, want to have an experience of being a part of something. So I think these are two separate things. So there's this being able to isolate the components of connection, which there are many, and there's divergent thinking on that, but at least to have some framework around it. And then also just operating from this place of basically understanding that people want to be a part of. They want to be a part of a group. They want to belong. They want to have a. So I'm not commenting on Bowen network or Bowen theory in general. I just think is a human thing. We are dealing with people at the end of the day. We are relating to people. We're being led into people's lives. It's an extremely privileged place, a privileged profession in that way. Where people are taking risks with us, and we have, there's a responsibility that comes with that. And part of that is, it's not just manufacturing connection as a way to gain people to let us in, but it's how do you actually show up in your presence that conveys a genuine, and sincere And I think that's hard to teach. That is difficult to teach. A sincere wish for people to be better and to grow and to belong and to, you know, have a resource that can be really useful. And I just think it's so I think that's where I'm coming from. And a lot of this is stripping everything away. There are fundamental human needs. And how do we, to segue this, run a business at the same time that we're ministering to people's basic needs and helping them grow even beyond that? So, and I think that plays out in our own dynamics and conversations as we think about ownership, restructure, and succession. You know, the emotional current undergirding just about every conversation we have about legalities and finances and, you know, employees. So yeah,
I hear you. It's an ongoing conversation.
It's more than just the undercurrent. It's the canvas that the painting is going on. It's the canvas is the relationship. You know, what I'm learning, I said this to Nick a few weeks ago, that this is really the leadership transition process we're in our own family business is really about our relationship. Mm-hmm. It's really not about the business fundamentally. That's easy stuff to work out. But how do we manage the intensity of our attachment? How do we manage the respect for each other? How do we manage our tendency to blame when something goes wrong? How do we make decisions together and separately? What kind of motives do I assign to Nick without knowing? I just assign motives. I know why he's doing this. You know, that kind of stuff. So the things we're trying to teach our clients, the things we're trying to model and I guess promote in our clients, the connectivity we're trying to promote requires things like vulnerability and humility and humor and transparency and risk. And I think that's all showing up in the way the invitation to those higher functioning modes. I'm experiencing that whenever Nick and I talk about the business, which is 2 or 3 times a week.
Yeah.
It's about the relationship. That's my only experience. I'm just experiencing it that way.
It's a beautiful phrase that the relationship is the canvas for where these other things play out. It seems like applicable to life, not just in dealing with business, but in whatever arises in a relationship that you have to manage. Nick, did anything pop up for you as your dad was talking?
I love this idea of stories as a trap. I think I carry around a lot of stories about my dad, and they're inventions of my own making. And it was speaking just for myself. I think those stories and narratives that I get into, the more I sort of find myself alert to them, I have a better chance of relating and connecting and learning, and it's just a dimension it's very important. It's a dimension of the relationship that's very important. Is when I form a assumption or a judgment or a story, mm-hmm. and I'm not aware of it, there's a really good chance that it is deciding how I respond. And the force of my response even is very much attached to the story that I have about what's going on across the table. And just like having a kid has exposed me to realities that I would never have been able to really experience in as deep a way that other people have experienced. Having these conversations with my father and seeing the stories at play in my own head, assumptions, and talking about those with him has been a direct sort of practice ground, emotional gym for what we're working with our clients on. You know, whenever we almost inevitably having a conversation about a feature of the business succession, a technical conversation about decisions we have to make or anything around the external dimensions of the business. There's always a piece of our conversations that end up kind of switching the space to the relationship piece and how we're functioning with each other. And stories are a big part of that. And stories are historical and often do not give credence to the possibility that something else might be going on or someone might be changed or has shifted in their own head. Yeah. I mean, there's stories from when I was 10 that come up today. So I just think knowing that is really helpful.
Can you,
I hear you.
would you be willing to give an example of a story you've had that you found yourself questioning?
Yeah, sure. I'll give you one. There's many, but one I think that's direct to this relationship with you, Dad, would be that you are looking out for yourself first and me second. So in the business succession, I have to be careful with you because I have to be alert to my own self-interest because you're not going to be alerted to that. You're going to be mostly focused on your self-interest, and we're both basically self-interested, as opposed to, for example, you really being interested in my success and me doing well and really wanting that. And that a lot of the moves you're making are coming from that space. That's not the story that is most prominent. The story that's most prominent is that you're mostly kind of trying to figure out a way to get yours here. And so there's a good one because, have I really checked that out directly? I don't think so. But the trap to me, Guillermo, in checking it out, and this is maybe another story. It says there's layers of story. But the trap in checking it out is that the other person, by checking it out, is going to be straight in their response and honest and not self-deluded, which is a big ask. So the layer in the story is checking it out is great. And I think that's useful for the connection to be asked instead of for the other person to just operate out of assumption. And the response, the story I have is I can't trust it. Can't trust it.
That would be the other layer.
The other layer. Yeah. And so
yeah. How do you work at that? How do you work at the layers?
I think there's one really important piece of this, and that's to talk about it. To say what I'm saying now without the need to solve for it. It's to expose it. Basically to expose the stories as stories. That has been served me very well in this particular relationship. And I think it's it's really fundamental to our work too. But leaders being able to expose the stories as stories and impressions and judgments, not as facts, right? It's if I can be really honest, if I can say, I have this impression and it could be wrong. I've got this is my not even experience, but this is the story I've got, the narrative I have in my head. What I'm sitting with is that, you don't like me. Let's just say. That's different than saying you don't like me.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I think the language is important in these cases.
One the latter one is kind of sounds like blame, and it's going to promote defensiveness, or it's not going to be heard. Yeah,
it's conviction. I know what you like and don't like. I know what you're thinking. I know you, and I get into that all the time. Versus to just be honest and factual, which is that this is just my impression. And this is where I mean, it could be really could be wrong. And I'm not saying that to you because I think I'm right. I'm trying to get you to change. I'm just saying it because it's just my story. So there's a cleanliness about that I really like.
Bringing it into the light.
Yeah. Yeah. Clean. It's ownership. I'm owning it as mine. I had a client the other day, similar, just another quick one was they are feeling dismissed, but the whole orientation is they're dismissing me. The team is dismissing me.
Mm-hmm.
It's not possible to be accurate when you say that, because you haven't asked, even the accurate thing is that you have the feeling of being dismissed. I feel dismissed, and I have the story and so the story of being dismissed is also like, what are the observable facts? Observable fact. Someone didn't respond to my email in a week. That's an observable fact, or I didn't receive a response. Well, let's operate from that space, and yeah. Anyway, there's a lot to say about it. But
I want to just put something in when I'm developing stories about anyone, but let's say you, Nick, or anybody else, that often involve a component of blame or of diagnosis. I've decided that and fill in the blanks. You're never on time, or you're out for yourself. You're not out for me, or people are dismissing me, or whatever the story is. One way to check it out for sure is to ask the person if my impression makes sense to them or rings true. And as Nick pointed out, that's not completely trustable, because it opens the possibility of delusion or lying or self delusion, whatever. I think there's another way to check it out, and that is to really go the other way with the fact pattern. So for the person who thinks they're being dismissed, give me 8 to 10 examples of you not being dismissed and taken seriously on this team. Write them down, send them to me. Give me examples of the opposite of your story. Give me examples of you being on time. Give me examples if I'm being coached and I say Nick is never on time, let's just say. And the coach says to me, cite for me 8 to 10 bullet points where your son was on time or early. This forces my thinking. I don't need to hear from Nick that my judgment is incorrect. I can decide for myself that it's incorrect by getting a fact pattern that's broader than my, So it turns out that I was late twice and I was on time 26 times, and I'm ready to call the person chronically late. But I'm not really going the other way. I like this idea of going the other way. It comes from Friedman's work.
Yeah.
Kind of challenging the story without even letting the other person know. Just challenging the story and seeing what happens.
Yeah, I like that. Getting the kind of the other side of the facts, not just the perception. Counter to it.
Every diagnosis is justifiable in my own head. I have evidence.
Absolutely. Humans are really good at justifying their perceptions.
One of my colleagues, Jim Ed Jones, he keeps using the phrase partial truth. What you're working with is a truth. It's true, but it's a partial truth. There's more to it. I really, that's challenging. That's very challenging.
And it's almost always the case, if not always. So the development of a strong belief or conviction, where does that come from? How does one develop a strong belief based on facts? This is the challenge with modern take on science, is that scientists are not to be trusted because, they can manipulate the data, and they can, and so all the innovations and things that have helped our society as a result of science, rigorous testing and strong conviction and principle are to be questioned. There's always other facts. There's always another data set. I think that's a real slippery slope too. That I think, and I think it maybe is a different context, but I do think there are patterns that are also, they're not equal. They're not weighted equally. Patterns aren't always equally weighted. And I think checking it out by going the other way can really offer a unique perspective. And it doesn't necessarily always result in there being the opposite being true.
Definitely.
Just a way to open things up a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I know you guys got to get going. So I got one more question for you. What is for each of you? What gives you hope these days?
I get a lot of hope from the way the U.S. Congress is able to work together. It's easy to lose hope. It's very easy to lose hope. And I would say that what gives me hope is the sparks of light I see in people, my own family, me. Maybe the bigger question is hope for what? What's the end game? But we can leave that for another podcast.
The next episode. What about you, Nick?
I struggle with this question. I really do. I'm sitting with it, realizing I don't know that I can honestly answer it. What gives me hope? Not that I don't have hope, but it's also not that I do have it. And I think it's a really hard question because what are we talking about? You know, like hope in humanity, hope in the earth itself. I mean, for how long? I mean, I have had to, like, why did I choose to have a son or have a kid? I could think of hope being a part of that, optimism, or also it just could be I just wanted to have a kid, you know, and that's it, you know. And so, I don't have what I would call an illusion that I'm having Damien so he can contribute meaningfully to the future of humanity. That is a question I find really hard to answer because I think in some part of my belief system, I don't know that hope is a strategy, is a good strategy, is to hope for stuff. And I just think humanity is going to ride its wave until it's flatlined, and the earth basically will be fine after that. And who knows how long it'll be. And we're just trying to do the best we can, all of us. And it's completely imperfect. And there's bad actors all over the place. And there's people trying to do their best and trying to help. And, you know, I think I have to have some belief in the future. Otherwise I wouldn't just curl up into a corner and not do anything. So, but it's a hard one, Guillermo. It's a tough one for me to answer because I think Damien is my hope, my son. Yeah.
Speaking of that, what would you want him to know that you didn't know earlier in life? What would you want something he carries with him to be?
I think I would want him to trust himself, or would want him to trust himself and to not be afraid to ask for help and take influence from others, but at the same time be self-assured. And there's just too many to say. That's the first thing that popped in, you know.
I hear you.
Yeah.
So sounds like a good place to end. Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us, Guillermo. Great to be with you.